or I really like curiosity because it gives permission for so much. It gives permission not to have the answer. It gives permission not to be an expert. And actually, I think linked really nicely with this topic, empathy, it is the precursor for empathy. You have to be curious about other people. There's no inherent good or bad about that, but I know the implication is these are the sort of the nice to haves if you can get round to it. The most important things are these hard skills, but maybe have, have a few of the soft skills. And I think that's rubbish. These are human skills, and they are the most important skills to have because, at least for the time being, work is made up of humans.
Today is a beautiful day outside, both in Amsterdam and in London, and I'm very happy to introduce you today on the Future of Skills podcast to my lovely friend, someone who we've been in touch with since probably 2014-ish onwards, right, Katie?
Yes, it's quite frightening actually how long it's been if I do the maths. Yeah.
Exactly. But I'm so happy that you have agreed for us to discuss today on a very good topic of empathy among the leaders and how to become an empathetic leader. So if that's okay, I'll introduce you a little bit in a bit more details, and then I'll let you to introduce yourself in our lovely question that we have in 3 sum-up words. But before we go down that line, I'll let everyone know that Katie Ireland is the former CEO and the co-founder of Enliven, known for her empathetic leadership and unwavering dedication to challenging systemic bias for positive change. With almost 20 years of experience in global marketing and STEM-based roles, she has held prominent positions such as Senior Director of Marketing Science at Nike, Director of CRM and Insights at House of Fraser, and Head of Customer Engagement at New Look, where we've met. So, a passionate advocate, Katie has actively promoted well-being and inclusion throughout her career, playing a pivotal role in shaping Nike's approach to disability issues. She is a mental health first aider, positive psychologist and somatic coach, leadership expert, and a qualified personal trainer who believes in the power of holistic well-being and human connection within the workplace and beyond. And it is my pleasure to have this chat today with you, Katie, because, I have reached out after seeing you, thank you, after seeing your LinkedIn article where you have posted about empathy. And it's a topic that very few leaders, I dare say, talk about these days for various reasons. So I thought it was brave, it was transparent, it was honest, and hence we're here. So if you don't mind, can you please kindly let us know, how do you view yourself in 3 sum-up words?
Yeah, sure. So, hi everyone. Lovely to meet you. As Nadia says, my name's Katie, and my pronouns are she and her. 3 words. I struggled a bit with this because I like to change my mind, and I think I was like, oh, how do I feel today? Maybe that's different based on how I feel tomorrow and what's going on. But the words that I came up with were playful. So this is something else that I'm really trying to bring into to work, and this in itself is a whole other podcast. So I won't talk too much about it, but I think this is really interesting. But I'm trying to bring more of that playful attitude into the way I work, the way I show up. I always have done as a leader. Nadia, I'm not sure if you remember because you were in a different team, but in my team at New Look, we used to do the Rumble. And so it was really just a team meeting for all of marketing. And I imagine the viewers are too young to remember Let's Get Ready to Rumble from Ant and Dec, but that was quite silly. So we'd do that, and then we'd have dancing and singing in the introduction, and we'd make a big thing about it. And I'm a big fan of, if we can add a little bit of fun and a little bit of silliness, why not? Exactly. Because we know that there's plenty of serious topics out there. So I think playful is one of my words. The next one is curious. I really like curious because it gives permission, or I really like curiosity because it gives permission for so much. It gives permission not to have the answer. It gives permission not to be an expert. And actually, I think linked really nicely with this topic, empathy, it is the precursor for empathy. You have to be curious about other people in order to understand their perspective and drive empathy. So I see it as a really important skill as well, to just unlock that connection with others. And then my final word, I went with authentic. So as you described there, Nadia, I've had a long, almost 20-year career in the corporate world. And most recently that was at Nike, so world-class global company. And a year ago, I left Nike to pursue purpose. So I always had this voice in my head that I wanted to do more. I wanted to help people, which was why I started studying alongside and doing bits and pieces alongside my previous corporate jobs. But I finally took the step to leave that and pursue initially the startup. So you mentioned Enliven, which is very much in the empathy space. So within that company, we used the power of VR to put you in the shoes of someone else, so you could really understand what it feels like, with the belief that if you know what it feels like, you've made the first step to the change. So I've chosen authentic because I'm in this bit of this sort of messy, sticky space at the moment where I've left the known arena of the corporate space that I know into now focusing on my coaching business full time and really going out into the world and supporting people to achieve their goals. So it feels much truer to me, I think, than perhaps the corporate version of me.
That's exciting how you have alluded to your progress from the corporate world to the self-seeking phase, whereby you were trying to discover what else is out there that you care about,
Yeah.
what else is out there that you can be useful with. And it's quite admirable the fact that, you know, you took the courage to leave, shall I say, a very solid role within a very solid company, to be able to then pursue the usefulness within, you know, your other behavioral skill set that you could put forward, which is definitely showing that this level of empathy that you're talking about is the one that you are living and experiencing within quite as well. Thank you so much for sharing this, because this nicely puts me in a very sliding position to go into the next question. And the next question is, and I'll leave more space for that for us to look into. It says, what are some of the core skills you feel have helped define who you have become today, Katie?
Sure. So, of course, I'm going to end with empathy and talk more about that. But before I get there, I'm going to mention an interesting one, which feels sort of counterintuitive, which is discipline. So I have been incredibly disciplined in terms of how I have spent my time to enable me to be able to study on the side and to progress in companies. Of course, also recognizing the privilege that I have, being white, middle class, native English speaker, you know, recognizing that too. But the discipline was there, which enabled me to be driven and achieve what I wanted. The reflection I've got on that, though, at now 40, is that arguably I was so disciplined, which was perhaps more of a trauma response, a protection response, which has served me really well in the first part of my career. But now I'm at the point where it's perhaps not serving me so well. It's still useful. It still enables me to get up every morning and go to the gym, which is something I enjoy. But I'm dialing that back now, that it's more around enjoyment in the moment and purpose, as opposed to just being driven. So that I'm sort of letting go of that one. I think linked to that, this sort of transition I mentioned, is the skill of being able to sort of define your why. And I can't think of sort of a nice word for this, but it's that ability to say, why am I doing this? Why are we doing this? As a leader, that is so important. And the way my brain works, I tend to be much more of a, let's figure out the why. And if I'm aligned with the why, then I'll figure out the how. Or somebody perhaps more detailed and better organized than me can figure out the how. But I need to be aligned with the why. If I'm not aligned with the why, then forget it. So I think that's really important to know. I mean, we talk about purpose, and it can be purpose on a big scale. For me, it's purpose because I know what I'm trying to achieve, but sometimes that can be daunting if you don't yet know your purpose. So really it's about, in every conversation, are you sure? Do you know why you've been asked to this meeting? Why are we all here? What are we trying to achieve? What's the point of this? Because in the corporate world, there's a ton of stuff that we all seem to do, but nobody knows why we're doing it.
Fair enough.
And just a small thing that's really helped with defining the why and moving forward is something I learnt at Ashridge when I did a management training program there, which is a bit like Hogwarts. It's super fun. And it was like this old-fashioned building, but it was very powerful training, because I remember there I was taught yes if rather than no because. Because every no because can be turned into a yes if. And so that's a really powerful one that I often think about. If there's something I want to do professionally or something personally, if I'm hearing the voices that say, you can't do that, it's a no, you can't do that because, you can't do that because, then you have to unpick it and say, okay, so yes, I can do that if this is true, if that's true. And then you say, okay, well, how do I make those things true? So you work around it. So that's those were some of the skills that I wanted to call out. And then, of course, empathy, human skills. So one of my bugbears is that, particularly within business, these are called soft skills. You'll see it on job descriptions and things, soft skills and hard skills.
Even by the name of it, by saying soft, it kind of, lures you into the direction of taking it as a soft or as a softie.
Yes. No, I recognize exactly. It's part of me sort of challenges my thinking and says, well, why does it matter if it's soft or hard? Because there's no inherent good or bad about that. But I know the implication is these are the sort of the nice to haves if you can get round to it. The most important things are these hard skills, but maybe have, have a few of the soft skills. And I think that's rubbish. These are human skills, and they are the most important skills to have, because at least for the time being, work is made up of humans. And so we need to have these skills. And that is where, for me, empathy has become really important in all my relationships, my personal relationships, but especially as a leader in terms of, how I connect with other leaders, how I connect with my team, and how I show up. So I think that that's the key skill that I know we're going to deep dive into a bit more today.
That's exactly so. And seeing how passionate you are when you're talking, there's a level of drive that you're sharing, within the concept of empathy. You've clearly have found out this as a skill throughout your experience so far, and you're passing this on into the others. And I know this is not necessarily the question that has been planned on the list, right? But it's something that you have inspired me now too.
Yeah. Okay.
In terms of, you are as a leader, you're emanating the empathy, you're putting it forward, it's seen and it's being acknowledged. When it comes to the team members that you're communicating with, that they're receptive of that feeling, how are they interacting in return? Do you often see empathy coming from them? Is this a two-way street often?
Yes, I think it's infectious. In most instances, that if people take the time and demonstrate empathy, you're more likely to play it back. But as I speak and I'm talking, I'm almost like you can't be in empathy on your own, because I mean, in some respects, yes, if you're seeing things on the news, people there perhaps can't feel you in empathy. But in the workplace experience, I think when you're speaking or communicating with your team, if it's effective empathy, they will feel it. You're in it together. That is the sort of the definition of empathy, that you both join where the person who needs empathy is, and you have that moment. So I do feel that there's a huge impact on the other person and this deeper connection. I mean, I think it's the core of all effective relationships. I can't see that you can have an effective relationship without empathy, without understanding someone else's perspective. It will be a transactional relationship, and by definition, I'm not sure that that is a relationship. That's a transaction.
How nicely you've put it. Thank you so much, Katie, by saying that this is a transaction. And here, if that's okay, I will read on a snippet from an article that I quite liked reading from the Harvard Business Review. What they have alluded to is the fact that in a post-pandemic article that they have released, they're saying that too much empathy can be a problem weighing you down, they say. And then as an advice, they say, instead of carrying the burden of empathy, you can lean and learn to experience the uplifted experience of compassion. Now, my question is, would you agree to that? What's your own definition of empathy alongside then?
Yeah, so we're almost getting into academic semantics here, which again, this is the right audience for. So I think Theresa Wiseman started with the definition of empathy, and she really focused on perspective taking, recognizing the emotion in others, staying out of judgment, and then playing that emotion back. Daniel Goleman and Paul Ekman took it one step further, and they identified 3 types of empathy. So the first one being cognitive, which is knowing how someone feels, very much aligned to Theresa Wiseman's definition. They then had emotional, which is about the attunement to the other person. So potentially that is what Theresa meant in terms of sort of playing that emotion back. But I when I think of attunement, I feel like it's a deeper level rather than just playing it back. You're feeling it in yourself. And of course that links to emotional intelligence, which Daniel Goleman has written a lot on. But importantly, that third one is compassionate empathy, which is the taking action. So some people treat compassion as a sort of a separate sister concept. Other people wrap it in. I like to think of it really as empathy in action. They have to be connected. And I would completely agree that empathy can be overwhelming, especially at the moment, especially with the atrocities that we're seeing happening in the world and the lack of challenge of that. As humans, we need to feel empowered and autonomous to be able to take action. So I think the compassion piece really enables us to move from feeling the pain with someone towards hopefully changing the pain or doing something. Now, what this doesn't mean is that we should start problem solving. So say someone comes to us, shares a problem. That doesn't mean that we have to do that classic thing of, oh, I've got the answer, do this, this, and this. Because usually that's not what people want when they share something with you. They want you to listen and experience. Perhaps the action is simply sitting with them, letting them talk about it, share that feeling with them, and then asking the person what might be helpful from here. And even if there's nothing that would be helpful, you've made yourself available. Yeah. In some cases, there are things you can do. Certainly, if you want to challenge some of the things that are going on in the world, you can write to your MP. You can do various things. And I think that's important, because an overwhelm of empathy and even an overwhelm of compassion can be too much. So there have been studies with caring professions, for example, where they really do have to look after themselves because they give so much empathy and compassion every day that it's important to also focus on self-compassion with that. It has to be a holistic concept. It's not just an outward thing that you offer up to others. It has to be for yourself, which can be challenging for people at times. I think we find it much easier to be nicer to our best friends than to ourselves, for example, but it is really important. And I say that this is really important because the reality is that psychologically, if we are judging ourselves about something, that judgment will seep over somehow into the judgment of others. whether we realize it or not. Now, this is a difficult one for me to take because, of course, I work in coaching. There's no judgment. I do a ton of work with empathy, and I sometimes say some really horrible things to myself. But I have to recognize that I must stop doing that, because I would never want these beliefs to seep in and then sort of get out. And the reality is, if it's true for someone else, it should be true for you. We all deserve, love and happiness, etc.
Thank you so much for such a wonderful answer, Katie. And again, here you've given me an inspiration for another question. But before I go there, so you've talked about self-compassion and how important it is to be careful with yourself and with the types of thoughts that you're admitting into your mind, so that they can then form your behavior, your feelings as well. They're the source of that. So before we go into the compassion topic, which is marvelous. It's beautiful for the next question that I had in mind, and that is, when we are knowing and willingly are sharing our empathetic state of mind with the others that we're communicating with, we're obviously helping them feel in a certain way. Now, you've nicely mentioned that you're seeing compassion as a form of action, as the next step from exposing empathy. So the question that I've got is, and I'll show it here as well. Is empathy a performance-based skill, do you think? And does it have the capability to drive that positive change? Because you have alluded to the action point of next question.
I think yes and yes. So I really see empathy as a muscle. And just like any muscle in your body, if you use it and you work it, it gets bigger and stronger. If you ignore it, it will waste away. I believe that as humans, empathy is innate within all of us. And for some people, it's bigger than others. But I definitely think it can be learnt and grown if you are open to to doing so, to learning more about others, experiencing different things. So I do think that it's a skill, it's a muscle, and it can absolutely drive positive change. I think it's critical for positive change. I would argue that we're in an empathy deficit within the world today. It's certainly my opinion. It feels like it. We are definitely in an empathy deficit within the workplace. I think, people are struggling. There's a lot it is a lot. The world is a lot. Work is a lot. The demands are a lot, and it's not getting easier. But we also know that together, humans are incredibly powerful. We are designed to be in community. That is how we drive positive change. And that must start with empathy, because empathy is about understanding the perspectives of others. We must recognize that our perspective is just 1 in 7 billion. That's fair enough. It's a tiny percentage. So we must connect with other people in order to understand their perspective, different experiences, what their life is like, what are the challenges they face, what is it that we don't know, because we often don't know what we don't know, and it's because that's not been our life. So I feel like the empathy is the starter fuel from which to get curious, to learn about other people. And then what often happens is, I think, we learn about other people, we learn about the injustice, the bias, everything that's going on, and then that flames a desire to come together and change it. But it has to start with empathy. You cannot have positive change if you don't care about other people. I say people, but it could equally be nature or any other important topic.
And thank you so much for alluding to that in terms of caring, because to me, empathy is more of a synonym of caring. Is just showing that you care for people around you as well. So starting from there as a first step. And you've mentioned that it comes with listening, or the ability to have an ear for the issues that our co-workers are probably encountering in the workspace. And you've also mentioned that we are living in a empathy deficit world where there is this lack of this feeling or expressing of this feeling. I would probably make a little bit of a parallel to the times when I've started at New Look, and you probably, if you recall those days, I appreciate it's been a long time ago, but I remember that also being in a fast-paced fashion environment, which is mass market, it's been a mass market for us. It's been always full of stress, or it would almost like test our abilities as employees working for such a high-paced corporate environment to show that we're resilient and we can cope with stress alongside. Now, I remember as part of that experience, and that has been completely the type of error that I took on with my experience. I was very performance orientated. So to me, working with various team members was making sure that they do deliver their best. I do deliver their best, and we don't quite have time enough to focus on our emotions and feelings that we put alongside. Can we do and put our best into it? Are we having this abilities to still cope and move along with the same speed that we started off with our tasks? We didn't have time to necessarily focus on that, and while working through so many other opportunities and career stages that I've had the chance to do so far, has made me think, and it's probably one of the reasons why now I'm asking this type of questions, because this lack of feeling almost in terms of trying to figure out what other people are caring about, how to better cater for their emotions. It's a skill in itself. And as you said yourself, it can be learned. But in terms of making sure that first you do have the ability to recognize the people that you work with, if they have this ability to have this empathy as a skill, or if they're lacking it. Do you think there are certain characteristics or features almost that we can have an eye on when looking at our leaders that we talk to, or our colleagues, to see if they lack empathy or if they don't?
Yeah, I mean, I think you'll feel it pretty quickly if empathy's not there. But I think it's interesting what you just said with things like that. In terms of fast-paced environments, we hear this so much. Companies are really striving for growth, or particularly in the example of British retail, it was often just trying to survive. It was a fight to survive. It was challenging. But I still think that empathy can exist there. If I think about my time at House of Fraser, that really was survival. And we went into administration while I was there. So it was like every idea on the table, let's see what we can do. Let's throw everything at it. But yet the empathy was still there because it had been built over time. The relationships were there. And I think that's the key thing. In one interaction, you'll not know from a leader, how big is their empathy muscle, because maybe they're distracted, maybe they're having a tough day,
Fair enough.
maybe a relative is sick. So you can't tell. What you're looking for really is a pattern of behavior. When you speak to somebody else and you share your perspective, do they listen? First, I mean, listening is the number one skill, I think, for
free of charge completely. It's a skill.
Just listen. Just listen. Yeah. And how do they listen? Are they listening to respond just to get their point of view, or are they listening to understand? Because those things are different.
Good point.
Do they offer up their own experiences to try and demonstrate that you are not alone, and they understand what you're saying? Are they interested in you as a human? And of course, we do need to recognize the topic of neurodiversity as well here. It might be that I don't want to take a neurotypical lens and say this is how everyone needs to respond. I also don't buy the statement that sometimes says that some neurodiverse people by definition have lower empathy, for example with autism. I've not seen that, and I think there are plenty of tests that have disproven that now. I think it's just about working out with any individual how you can communicate effectively, and what empathy looks and feels like in one relationship may be different to how it looks and feels in another relationship. But what it comes back to is, how does it feel? So another thing that I'm really passionate about is somatic leadership. So I do somatic coaching, using your body. Everything we do, it feels like, is in the mind, especially in the workplace. It's all cognitive. We act like we're just brains going in jars into work. That's not true. We're full humans. You feel when you've got a connection with someone, even across the screen, you feel it. And so I think just look out for that. And if you're in an organization or a workplace and you're not seeing the empathy you want to see, you start being it. I think this is it. It is, I said, it's infectious, it's contagious. People will start to do it. And of course, I'm not naive to say, okay, well, we've got loads of time to talk about feelings, we've got a job to do. Yes, and that's why we need to tackle the systems. The system is not built for us to build meaningful connections. If the system is built, as it very much often is in corporate style roles, to come in, deliver, to produce as much as you can in as little time as you can, well, the system is going to break. And I do believe that our systems are broken. I do believe the way we're working is broken. And I do believe that the younger generation coming through now are just going to say, I'm absolutely not doing this. I'm not putting up this, and sort of turning to us. I'm an older millennial, and saying, what on earth were you doing? Why did you work this way? Why did you put up with this? Why didn't you do something? Why are we having now to change this? Because I think we're humans. We are not designed to be always on with our performance all the time. We are designed to go through flow. So if there is a big intense moment, there's a deadline, you go all in, and maybe in that moment you don't need to have so much human connection. You don't perhaps make the time for so much of that because everyone's a bit more goal focused. But then after that's done, then there's time to reconnect. How's everyone doing? How was that? Have people been able to sort of rebalance? It's getting that ebbs and flows. Nature, everything ebbs and flows. That's what we need. And that's not, unfortunately, the way the workplace is set up in all cases.
And you're making a nice point in terms of recognizing basically the fact that a lot of corporate cultures are broken nowadays, that all of them, or the majority of them, are focused solely on performance and not necessarily thinking about the how element. How do we actually make sure that we get there? But the how responds to a set of inexistent or existing skills within the team. If they are able to, from their emotional state of mind, to do what you're asking them to do. If not, then maybe there is a way of embracing that, of helping them get there, but doing that from the emotional perspective rather than the purely performance perspective. So on that note, and I know that you're passionate about algorithms and the patterns. Data per se. Data is in your DNA, as they call it these days, as a phrase, right? So definitely that's about Katie. But along these lines, do you feel that it would help within the corporate environments to have some form of either alerting mechanism to be able to identify this states of mind of people or teams when they're going down the slope as opposed to being completely uplifted? Because it's almost like an alarming situation. When that happens, you need to be, as a leader, aware that you're not going to get the max out of this person in your team because he's going through a transitionary mode and he needs some help. But he often might not raise the alarm himself. He might not talk about it openly. And I know that you are also a mental health first aider, which means that you're there in your team if they need you. You're there to listen to them if they need you. But it's the case of, from their perspective, to be brave to actually acknowledge that they've got an issue.
Yes, yeah, and this is really tricky. One thing that I did while I was at Nike, our weekly team meeting that we had during COVID, which was all online, of course. The first thing we did, and it took at least half an hour, was have a check-in. How is everyone feeling? Now, naturally, some people want to share a lot. Some people don't want to share anything at all. That is fine. It was completely voluntary. But what I was deliberately trying to demonstrate to my team was that this is a net to try and catch you. You are not alone, because I was really aware. And in fact, at the time I hadn't met my husband. So I was alone through COVID, as were many team members, and many of us not in our home countries either. So there weren't other people that we could pop and see, and family groups within our bubbles or whatever the rules were. So the purpose of this meeting was just to create a visible, safe space where people could share if they wanted to. And I got some really nice feedback from one of my team after, who sort of retrospectively shared that he had really been having some struggles at the time. And that really helped. So even though he never shared anything, just knowing that it was okay not to be okay, created this sense of, I am not alone. Because I think that is the most debilitating thing as humans, feeling like you're the only one. You know, this sense of loneliness we're hearing being talked about a lot more. But when you've got a challenge and feeling like, oh, I'm the only one, it's like the problem times two. So just recognizing that we might all be struggling in different ways, because you never know what's going on with someone. That can be really important. And I'd like to see more of that in organizations, in whichever way makes sense for that leader and that team. It's hard to do something that works for everyone, which is why you need lots of initiatives. Going back to your point on data, so I think this is really interesting, because increasingly we are seeing data being collected. We're seeing data from employee engagement surveys, annual employee engagement surveys. In my experience, people fill those in, share that they're not doing very well. Leadership will look at that, and then we move on and we carry on running the business. And then next year comes back, oh, lo and behold, we're still seeing these figures. The data is really important, and I always encourage data collection, because data enables you to tell stories, it enables you to compare over time. But the gap that I see at the moment within the workplace is, I think people don't yet really believe that it is impacting the business bottom line. So we should be looking after people from a moral perspective. That should be clear. Like, we're fellow humans. For me, the moral argument is enough, and sometimes too much, because I do tend to care too deeply for my team, which doesn't necessarily always translate into progression. But the financial case is also really clear. The mental health challenges are costing businesses billions every year. Discrimination and bias costing billions on top of that. You know, the fact that the workplace is not as empathic or as safe or as inclusive as it could be is hurting businesses. And I don't yet truly believe that all leaders believe it, because it goes in sort of a week, you know, an annual survey or a report, but it's hard to create that direct correlation in the way that you can with, you know, if your digital marketing's not performing, you can usually see in that given week, that didn't work, right, next week we'll do something else perhaps. But with these things, the undercurrents, and I think what we need is to really start recognizing that we do need to change the way that the world of work is, because it's not working really for anyone. Even the people that seemingly have it all, I would argue it's not really working for them, for the majority.
I would completely agree to that, Katie. And the fact that, as you said yourself, in the working environment, when a lot is being, probably acknowledged from the perspective of sending out some surveys, so they know that the issue, the well-being issue is still there, the mental health issue is still there, it's costing them billions. And yet, in terms of acting on that, there's little that often is being done in that regard. So I'm wondering, do you think, and that's purely, as you quite rightly alluded to, in digital marketing, if something doesn't work, or in the world of marketing per se, numbers can tell us the story. It almost paints out the picture to say that empathy is not measurable, of course, as many other soft skills, as we call them these days, right? We can't necessarily transition or link it up to a particular action in the back end to say, oh, that has, that's action that a leader has taken on the back of an emotional problem has actually resulted in a great performance for that month in that team. So because it's not that necessarily immediately connected to the holistic results now, and we don't have necessarily a guidance book that we could look and say, oh, in that case, that of that issue or emotional issue that has been expressed, the leader has taken that type of action. And maybe if that would have been recorded, many other people would have it as a guideline to look into, more like an FAQ book on emotional issues, right?
Yeah.
And see how this can be navigated through. I wonder, do you think in future with more acknowledgement, more awareness around these issues, more can be done so that we can document this type of experiences moving forward?
Yeah, so it's interesting as you were talking, I was thinking about the audience of this, and I'm sure that there will be data scientists here that, well, maybe they absolutely can. I mean, in Enliven, I created a framework to measure empathy to demonstrate the pre and the post changes.
Very interesting.
So in theory, if an organization's willing, then I think you could take various data points and then look at the relationship between them. I've not seen that done as yet, and I've certainly not seen it as a product in the marketplace, but here's an invitation to the group out there to consider it. I think for most things, and I talk a lot about this as well from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective, you've got to start with the data. Because if you haven't got the data, it's really easy to pretend that there aren't any issues. And in every organization, there are issues because there are issues in society and in the world. So, of course, there will be issues in an organization. And I don't think it's helpful to say, even in nice organizations, oh, we don't have issues here. Of course you do. We've got humans. Humans don't show up as their best selves every day. We make mistakes. We're fallible. That's great. That's also how we get the brilliance. But if you acknowledge, okay, well, where are we doing well? Where could we improve? Then I absolutely think you could measure these things. Whether you want to measure empathy specifically or tie it in with other goals, I'm really open. But be clear what it is that you're looking to achieve, and measure that. And then importantly, include qualitative research as well. So the numbers are great, but the numbers will never tell you the why.
Katie, regarding what you were saying about the capabilities that we as human and we hold organic minds, we're bound to certain type of thinking, certain type of patterns of thinking, hence why we do behave in a certain way, we do feel in a certain way. When it comes to the AI revolution that everybody's talking about these days, and given that data is at its core, and then data is being infused into it by humans ultimately. So humans are at the far end, the ones that are teaching it to consume certain patterns of data. What do you think about that? How would AI be able to become an empathetic type of realm for us to interact with?
Yeah, I think this is a super interesting question. And, to be totally honest, I am worried about AI. I've spent my entire career working with it, but I am still worried because I know the potential, or rather, I can imagine the potential. I don't yet know what that will be. And I'm sort of aligned with Mo Gaudat's perspective that it's not necessarily the AI we need to worry about, it's the humans building the AI, because, we've seen time and time again the challenges of power and what people will be willing to do. But I choose to take a positive view that I believe actually AI can help us become more human, and it can support us in becoming more empathic without even realizing. So this was actually triggered from a conversation I had with my co-founder from Enliven. He loved ChatGPT. Really loved it, so much so that his wife thought we had hired someone called Chad. She thought it was a member of the team because he was talking about it so much. So we now sort of refer to ChatGPT as Chad. And I found that he was a real expert user of getting the best from ChatGPT. And the reason he did it was that, perhaps unbeknownst to him, he was learning how to be a more effective communicator and show empathy. So in order to get the best out of your queries, you need to be really specific about what you're looking for. So Brene Brown talks of this concept of paint done. And as a leader, this is really important, because very often we have an idea in our head of what does it mean to have completed something. What we've got in our heads is not what's in someone else's heads, And as a leader, I think it's really important to set the parameters of what it is you're expecting, to ensure, A, that you get what you're looking for, but also to ensure that somebody doesn't work really, really hard on something where you only wanted something simple. And so I think it's really important that you set that parameter. So that's a useful skill of working with humans. When you get an answer, you've got the opportunity to say, okay, help me to understand how you arrived at this. Again, a great skill when leading people.
Yep.
If it's not quite right, you can provide feedback, but you only get something better if you provide useful feedback that explains what bit is working well and what bit's not working well. Again, very useful in leadership. You can even ask ChatGPT, how do you think you could make this better? So again, great for leadership, and see what Chad comes up with. And so sort of accidentally, by becoming an expert in using these chatbots, you're actually learning how to be a more effective communicator with another human being. And if you find that actually you haven't been clear enough, it's also about saying, oh gosh, what can I do better next time? Because of course, any communication, it's a two-way thing. So I always found as a leader, if my team didn't quite produce what I was looking for, well, that's on me. I wasn't clear enough. I didn't give a clear enough brief. That's not them. That's me. So I need to look at, what can I change next time? So I sort of take that positive slant. And of course, we see tons of really helpful applications of AI, for example. I loved the work that they're doing out in the States with, there was a lady, Anne, who'd had a stroke, and they were using the connection with her brain so she could communicate much more quickly and effectively. So there's a ton of wonderful stuff. And I also think it can be used to really trigger behavioral change. So I was thinking, like, I have a smartwatch, which I've turned it off now because I felt like I was just being haunted by this watch telling me I needed to move all the time. But what about if it triggered us to do nice things, to check in with someone, to listen? Are you doing this? We focus on the physical, but I feel that there's something that could be done there. It is important to understand, though, that everything that's being built today is inherently biased. It will be racist, sexist, all the ableist, because the data it's using is from a society that is all of those things. So
Exactly.
we really need to look at the data we're feeding in, but also importantly, we need to make sure that the models that are being built by a diverse representation of society, because they will pick up things within the model build that the normative group may not. So sort of my call to action really is, don't be afraid of it, but lean into it, because if we continue to sort of stand back, it will continue to reflect only one group of society, and it does have the potential to be the most powerful thing that we've seen.
So what you're saying basically is what I'm reading from this is, rather than being against it, rather take the right alongside it and
Yes.
help it learn from, the better of you, rather than,
Yes.
the single-handed view of what it can have. So
Yeah.
it's a marvelous point of view, Katie. Very inclusive at the same time, and very empowering to say that you have the power to influence the thinking of an AI based on the experiences that you've had, and that's gorgeous. It's just also helping acknowledge the fact that the experiences that we live, what we are coming with, are definitely of value. So at any point in our careers, in our relationships, we shouldn't be feeling undervalued because we're a luggage of information, of knowledge, and experiences.
Absolutely. Yeah.
with that, I can not be more grateful for the time you have offered to our discussion today. And I'm sure that those listening to our chat afterwards will find a lot of value in this. And because the whole topic is so huge and it's so empowering, I think there's a lot more to be built up upon it, and hopefully we'll get a lot more awareness out there for people to tune in, be interested more in the topic, and acknowledge and experience a better behavior towards themselves and their teams.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's been such a treat to chat to you again, Nadia. It's been a lot of fun. My article about empathy is available on my LinkedIn page. So if anyone wants to check that out, feel free. I also have some coaching spots available with a special student rate in case anyone's interested. But I hope this has been helpful. It's been an absolute delight to chat.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Likewise, Katie. And I will be adding the links that you have just mentioned to the YouTube post as well, so that there will be this connection there afterwards. And welcoming everyone who would have this interest to further develop to get in touch with Katie, because you're literally offering a lot of value, Katie. As I said, into the session that we had also on the self-talk and the one that we're having now, they're super connected between these themes, and I feel that there's a lot for us to take into it. Thank you so much, and wishing you a lovely day ahead.
Likewise, Nadia. Hopefully speak to you again soon.